Recent developments on antibiotics, just the things that I'm going to cover real quick. Roxarsone, there was a voluntary withdrawal of Roxarsone by the manufacturer earlier this year. Extra label drug use prohibition on cephalosporin. The VFDs and its relationship to the VCPR is kind of complicated, so I want to try and make sure that at least the folks here can understand it, and hopefully if you can't, maybe you'll catch it next round, and if there's any questions, I'd be happy to take them. It is really complicated, and hopefully we can get that straightened out. And then this just evolved, and I've been dealing with the mad chaos on this in the past couple of days, but there was a court ruling on penicillin and tetracyclines with the FDA just in the past couple of days. So that's been really recent and really interesting. So on Roxarsone. There's a link here that you can read. It's kind of interesting that there was voluntary withdrawal on this because it very clearly states that it does not pose a health risk. So why it's withdrawn, we're not really sure. But Roxarsone is a coccidiostat that is used in poultry. It's got a 5-day withdrawal time. Technically, it is not an antibiotic, but it is considered an antimicrobial. Given the 5-day withdrawal time, if it is withdrawn with an extended withdrawal time, it can't be detected in chicken livers. My understanding is it actually isn't detected in muscle tissue at all, even at the very low levels in the parts per billion. So it is somewhat unclear as to why the drug was voluntarily withdrawn, other than perhaps that it does cause some concern from the consumer advocacy groups, as well as it is a drug that is known to be approved for weight gain, feed efficiency, and it falls under the classification of growth promotion drugs. So that, combined with the fact that it is an arsenical, causes a lot of concern from consumer advocacy groups. It is an organic arsenical. Generally, it's inorganic arsenicals that are perceived to be a public health hazard. However, again, low levels of the inorganic compound was found in chicken livers. So that is the decision that was made on that. On to extra label drug use. This is the algorithm that AVMA has available for extra label drug use. It will now need to be changed to include cephalosporins. So we're working on that, and it will be a little bit of time before we manage to update that for veterinarians to use. But this is the current one that we have available. So that little box in the lower right-hand corner will have to be changed for extra label drug use in food animals. And it won't look nearly as pretty because there's a lot of different caveats to the cephalosporin prohibition. So these are the prohibited uses kind of in a nutshell. What you cannot do is use it at a different dose level, frequency, duration, or route of administration. Of particular interest to this group is the in ovo uses that were specifically named in the order of prohibition. So those things that are not on the label in terms of dose level, frequency, duration, route of administration, again, in ovo uses cannot be used. You can't use cephalosporins that aren't approved for use in that particular species. They specifically called out cephalosporin drugs that are approved for use in humans or companion animals. And then, of course, cephalosporins used for prevention are not allowed. Currently, there are no cephalosporins that are approved for prevention uses. They are approved for control and they are approved for treatment, but there are none that are approved for prevention. So a lot of people have said, okay, so what exactly qualifies as prevention and what qualifies as control? Because sometimes that's kind of a gray area. Well, in Guidance 209 that's published by FDA, it does have some specifications for what FDA perceives to be appropriate prevention uses. But again, it's kind of a gray area. No one has actually asked the question. AVMA has taken the position where we're not going to ask FDA to define for us what they think is prevention and what is control. The direction that we've given our veterinarians is that you should keep adequate records to justify your use of cephalosporins when you're using them extra labeling. The allowed extra label uses, which were essentially exempted from the order of prohibition, are cephalosporin, which right now is only approved for intramammary uses. They are available over the counter. FDA perceives those not to be a significant human health hazard, so those are exempted. And then vets are still allowed to use or prescribe cephalosporins for a different indication. So basically, you know, if it's for a different disease other than what's on the label, you can still use it, but you still have to follow the dose, frequency, duration, and route of administration that's on the label. And of course, minor food-producing species are exempted. Again, minor use, minor species type stuff is exempted.
If you go by those recommendations on the label, then that makes it useless for poultry, because how am I going to use it in broiler breeders or turkey breeders if I'm going to dose by a dose for a baby poult or a baby chick? And that's what I object to the FDA on our reply.
That is a significant concern. And so, hence AVMA's response. It's a rather lengthy response, and you are free to read it there. We did not specifically ask FDA to revoke the order of prohibition, because obviously that's not going to happen a second time. We did question some of the data and the scientific rationale and asked for further clarification for how it is that they came to the conclusions that they came to for that order of prohibition. However, again, they're not going to revoke yet another order of prohibition. So it is what it is. We haven't received any response to that. Obviously, it was submitted fairly recently. It is expected to be implemented by the end of April, I think. Well, actually, no, I think it was April 6th was the date of implementation. So everybody is expected to follow the order of prohibition as it stands. We haven't heard anything else. There's an AVMA at Work blog that outlines the order of prohibition, and then, of course, there's our lovely podcast that tells you all about the order of prohibition as well. So all that information is available there for you. And I just like to show this slide when I talk about VFDs, because this is what VFDs used to consist of. Hopefully it will no longer be like this as we move forward in the VFD process. So VFDs, Veterinary Feed Directive. Most people are not particularly familiar with VFDs because currently there are only 2 products approved for VFDs. And VFDs are a prescription-like product regulated by the FDA on a federal level. Right now there's 2 that are approved for swine and 2 approved for use in aquaculture. So the swine vets are pretty familiar with using them, or some swine vets. Most other food animal producers and veterinarians are not very familiar with this process. But we hope that as the process evolves, more people will become familiar with it. AVMA is actively working with FDA to streamline the process as it moves forward, because the thought process is that this will be the vehicle for greater veterinary oversight of antimicrobials. So there's a couple of things that are kind of in play that relate to VFDs. One is that the products that are currently available in feed over the counter are likely to move towards the VFD. So there should not be antimicrobials that are available in feed over the counter anymore. They will slowly move towards a VFD. The Guidance for Industry 213 is expected to assist with that process in some manner. At the same time, it's also supposed to seek therapeutic claims for the production uses to move growth promotion type claims towards prevention and control claims. So I think that that thought process is somewhat twofold. We're not really clear on what that might say or what it's going to look like, but I think that that's the general thought process, is that these things are going to kind of move all at the same time. So there are several documents that are floating around, and were expected to come out in the near future, in the past couple of weeks, actually. So it would be one draft codified language for the VFD process, how it's supposed to move forward in this more streamlined process without the mountain of paperwork that you saw. This Guidance 213 to move the growth promotion products more towards prevention and control products, and then also this Guidance 209 that would indicate, greater veterinary oversight and potentially no more growth promotion products. This is something that everybody's seen before, the draft Guidance 209. It would be finalized. It's not expected to look any different. So those were the 3 things that were expected to come out, say, a week or 2 ago. But they didn't actually come out. We're not real clear why that is, but I might get to that in a little bit. So anyways, so on the VFDs, AVMA has a steering committee that has been working very closely with FDA on this specific issue with VFDs and having greater veterinary oversight of antimicrobials. And with that steering committee, we've also included USDA in that discussion because USDA does have the resources to assist in letting us know, where there may be shortage areas of veterinarians and veterinary oversight in rural communities and that type of thing. So that is very helpful to us in that discussion process. And then, again, I said the draft codified language for VFDs is expected to be released for public comment. AVMA has worked really hard to ask that those documents, particularly related to the VFD, be prioritized and released by Secretary Sebelius and Commissioner Hamburg. We've written letters, and our GRD, the Government Relations Division, has worked very hard to have that process be expedited. However, we've been told that it's been somewhat superseded by the Food Safety Modernization Act and some of the implementation processes of that. So again, we were expecting that it would be released somewhat recently, but it has not been. So VFDs and the VCPR, this is where the mass confusion has occurred. And I'll try to make this as concise as possible, but it is very, very confusing. So the current VFD language, as it stands, requires a VCPR that is defined in MDUCA for extra-labeled drug use. It refers back to this language that is in MDUCA for extra-labeled drug use, and there's a link here for that. And the requirement specifically says that, the VCPR can only exist when the vet has recently seen and is personally acquainted with the keeping and care of the animals, blah, 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 blah. And the part that is most concerning is where it says that you have to have timely visits to the premises. So most of y'all, I'm sure, work with poultry. Being the way that poultry is produced, I don't know how often anybody actually visits the specific premises, right? I mean, does that happen a lot? I can't really say that it does. So if the products that are in feed go to VFD, and there's this requirement that you visit the actual premises, so that means the barn or the geographic location, that word premises, I think is going to be a problem. A lot of us think that is going to be a problem. I don't know if you folks agree with that, but some of us think that's going to be a problem. At one point, some of the swine vets told us that they think that it's going to be a problem. Now there's a discussion taking place where people are saying, well, we actually don't think that's going to be a problem. And I don't know. So that's all I'm saying is there seems to be some shifts and changes in opinion. Is this word a problem? Is it not a problem? I do not know, but it is a question. So now there are other VCPRs floating about. Keep in mind, this VCPR is now currently in the VFD requirement language and in MDUCA. That's where it lives. The other places where the VCPR lives is in AVMA's Model Practice Act, AVMA's Principle of Veterinary Medical Ethics, and in state requirements. So in the State Practice Act, some states don't require VCPR at all, which might sound a bit odd, but there are actual states that do not require a VCPR to dispense any prescription products. So AVMA right now is in the process of rewriting the Model Practice Act. And what happens when AVMA does this is the states look to this Model Practice Act, and some will say, okay, we really like it, we'll take it as it's written and adopt it as our own. Other states will look at it and say, meh, we don't like it, whatever, we'll do what we like on our own. So there may be 50 different versions of this, there may not be any version of it because some states don't require a VCPR at all. Now, AVMA's Model Practice Act, as I said, is undergoing revision. And as a part of that, this VCPR is also undergoing revision. As I said, some folks thought that that word premises and the timely visits and examination of the animal might be problematic, particularly for food animal medicine. Again, with the vertically integrated practices, particularly in poultry and swine, we thought this could be a problem. So the new draft language to be considered right now, and I just cut out part of it because this is the part that I thought was most important. This is the draft language to be considered in about a month or so. This, I think, is more acceptable language, and this is my personal opinion, is that the vet is personally acquainted with the keeping care of the patient, and patient is defined elsewhere in the Practice Act as an animal or group of animals, herd or flock, etc. So I know it says patient, but it is called a VCPR, veterinary client-patient relationship. So that is defined elsewhere, so I think that'll be okay. But the part here where I think is important is it says medically appropriate and timely visits, and therefore it doesn't specify that it has to be recent, because how recent is recent, no one really knows, but it's medically appropriate and timely, and it's to an operation. So therefore, you can visit one component of the operation, have an understanding of how the entire operation works, where, you know, part of the herd or flock is managed, and still have an understanding of the entire process, and still be able to prescribe a drug, write the VFD as this process moves forward, and still have a valid VCPR without violating the VCPR. And that was the thought process in drafting this new language. Again, we have some folks who are saying, well, we don't want to change the VCPR as if it's written in stone, because it is codified in AMDUCA as the AMDUCA VCPR for extra label drug use. So, again, mass confusion, I don't know, but this is the new draft language that is currently being considered in the Model Practice Act. So, what on earth does all this mean? Are there going to be multiple VCPRs? Well, yeah, there already are multiple VCPRs because they're existing in different states. Each state has already adopted what they believe to be an appropriate VCPR. So some of them have copied AVMA's VCPR word for word, others have not. So there are already different VCPRs floating around. If the draft language is approved, there still won't be any changes to the AMDUCA VCPR because that is basically written in stone in federal code. There is no changing that unless FDA and legislation and whatever changes that. So that is not going to change whatsoever. That is for extra label drug use only. The only allowance that we might have for changing the VCPR in terms of the VFD is a different story. So individual states will be able to choose whether or not they want to accept AVMA's Model Practice Act with this new VCPR language that we may adopt. And then the VCPR with the principles of medical ethics will be considered separately. So likely if it passes, then we'll look at our medical ethics and that'll probably be the same verbiage that winds up in there. And all of our allied organizations that have representation on the House of Delegates and within our councils and committees and everywhere else do have the ability to vote and provide input on whether or not they like this new language. So everybody here who has some say in all of this, for Pete's sake, if you have some opinion, say so. So what do we want for the VFDs? Because currently, right now, the requirement is the VCPR that is in AMDUCA for extra label drug use. And that's the one that says you gotta go to the premises and you gotta see the animals on the premises to write the VFD. Is that okay? Because we do have some people saying that's what they want. They want that in the VFD. When all these products that are now in feed over the counter go VFD, and there are a lot of them, they're saying that's what they want. And if that's what they want, as AVMA, we're happy to go with whatever it is our stakeholders want. but we need a clear sense of direction. And I'm not saying anything one way or the other, but we do need that direction from our stakeholders. So whatever it is that everybody comes together and says what they want, that is what AVMA will do, because we work under our membership and our leadership. So it's, you know, majority wins kind of a thing. What is currently expected, though, from what we hear from FDA, because this is what they were hearing, is in the draft codified language, it's expected to be more prescription-like, where it'll say, federal law restricts this drug to use by or on the order of a licensed veterinarian. So what does that mean? That means it'll be loose, where it's left up to the states, and some states do not require VCPR at all, and some states will defer to the Model Practice Act or AVMA's definition or what have you. So again, it sort of behooves us to agree with whatever it is that AVMA decides. So help us decide, yay or nay, what do you like? What do you like for the VCPR definition? Do we change? Do we not? What do you want? And now on to the penicillins and tetracyclines. This is the recent court ruling. I put this in here just because I thought it was amusing. But so, you know, here's a wrench in the machinery here. Here we thought that, you know, we were going to move forward with this process of having greater veterinary oversight, moving the drugs from over-the-counter to VFDs, growth promotion uses, moving towards prevention and control, a voluntary process, something that works well for all of us, right? Well, this court ruling comes along, a wrench in the machinery, and this federal court ruling comes out in the past few days. It says, the commissioner or director of CVM must issue a notice of the proposed withdrawals, provide an opportunity for hearing to the relevant drug sponsors, blah, 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 blah. And, of course, basically what this really says is penicillins and tetracyclines that are currently approved for production uses, growth promotion uses, must be withdrawn, and FDA must start the withdrawal process and provide an opportunity for the hearing. Drug sponsors must prove the safety of these drugs. Basically the same thing that is said in PAMTA. You've all heard about PAMTA. So that's kind of what this says. Now FDA's resources that were previously put forward to this VFD, Guidance 213, Guidance 209 documents that we were expecting to see any day now, are now running around dealing with this. So we don't really know what's going to happen to our VFDs and our guidance documents now because there's this to deal with just in the past couple of days.